Making comparisons between accounting softwares, not just QuickBooks accounting softwares, but any types of accounting softwares. One of the first and primary categories we want to consider is whether we're talking about a desktop software or online cloud-based software. This categorization being important because whether the software is physically on our actual desktop or in the cloud online will have a significant impact on the functionality, how we access, and possibly how we pay for the software. Now, QuickBooks is great for this type of comparison because they have both a desktop version and an online version, allowing us to do that kind of head-to-head comparison with the same company that we can then apply to other softwares, other companies most likely not having both a desktop and online version. They're specializing in essence, one or the other. So we can apply the concepts to a larger scale oftentimes. However, when we're thinking about the QuickBooks world, we're usually thinking about the desktop version as the older version. That's the one that's been around forever. And then the new person on the block, the new software around is going to be the online version, which clearly, especially when we're talking about small to mid-sized companies, Intuit, the owner of QuickBooks, is marketing towards. So small to mid-sized companies, they're really trying to get everybody into the online version. That doesn't mean that the desktop version has basically gone away or that we don't want to understand the advantages and disadvantages of a desktop version, because even within the QuickBooks world, if you have more advanced type of needs, such as in particular inventory needs, you might still be using Desktop Enterprise, for example, for those particular needs, and the concepts that we understand between the two might still be comparable to other types of software packages. So it's important to kind of look at the difference between them. So when we're thinking about Intuit world, QuickBooks in particular, the first categorization we want to think about is, are you talking about a desktop version or an online software version when you're thinking about QuickBooks? Because these distinction is basically two different types of software. The desktop version and online version do in essence the same thing, but how you access them and how you navigate through them looks very, very different. And also, if we were going to move, for example, from the desktop version to the online version, which QuickBooks is often pushing for small to mid-sized businesses, so that might even be an area of specialization at this point in time, or if you're moving from the online version to the desktop version, that's going to be somewhat of a painful move because in essence, you're basically moving to a new software. That's almost as much of a pain as going from a QuickBooks software to a whole different company or something like that, because again, the softwares are quite different, although Intuit is trying to make that transfer specifically from the desktop version to the online version as painless as possible. Now, once you're within either the desktop or online version, there's in essence different tiers, different levels that you can pay for. And that would be kind of like if you just having more functionality, you're paying for more functionality within that particular software. So in our case, we're going to be focusing in on the online software. So the first thing we want to understand is we're going to be choosing the online software rather than the desktop software, which have a really different look and feel to it. Although if you want to follow along with the desktop software, you can still kind of figure it out, but it won't look exactly the same. Once we're on the online software, we have those different tier levels that we can pay for, paying for more functionality. That then is not a move into a completely different software, but rather staying in the same software and paying for, again, more access within that software. So in other words, once we've chosen an online software, the next thing you want to consider is how much functionality you need within that software so that you pick the functionality that's high enough to cover your needs, but not paying for more than you actually need. And if you need to level up in the future, that's usually an easy thing to do. So in other words, maybe you only have 1 or 2 users of the software. If you pick the software that has that lower tier of 1 or 2 users, and then later you need more users, you can pretty easily level up, pay more for the added functionality. However, if you start out at the added functionality and you start to get used to using some of the tools that are in that added functionality, realizing, however, that you don't actually need those tools and you want to level back down, that could be more difficult to do, right? It's not possibly not as difficult as going from an online software to the desktop software, but because you were using some of those tools in the higher up level, it might be a little bit more difficult to say, hey, I want to tier it back. So just from a practical standpoint, we want to first think, if you're deciding what type of software to apply to your business, do I want a desktop or online software? In our case, we're looking at the online version. Once you've chosen one or the other, in our case online, what's the lowest tier level that I can pay for that covers the needs that I need to basically cover? And then how easy is it for me to level up versus, again, going too high and then trying to level down? All right, so that's going to be our idea here. So we're going to be comparing the two. Now, remember that the desktop version of the software for small to mid-sized businesses, Intuit seems to be basically trying to move out of. So want to put that out up front. If you're a small to mid-sized business, you're not going to get the Desktop Pro as easily as you could before, but you still might see desktop because it's around for the enterprise.